Welcome, everyone, to the Cyberphysics Podcast, where we unravel the complex web of cybersecurity through the lens of its foundational principles. I'm your host, and today, we embark on an intellectual journey that mirrors the intricacy of physics itself. Joining us are two remarkable experts, Ranghan Venkatraman and Dmitriy Sokolovskiy, as we delve into cyberphysics in essence.
So very good to meet you. So I'd like to perhaps start with a quick intro to cyberphysics. The cyberphysics is really an opportunity for us to get together with the likes of you, CISOs, and people who are passionate about security. The goal is to hopefully get some insights out of you that the audience can hopefully gain wisdom from. And maybe for the benefit of the audience, a quick intro from you would be great.
Thanks for having me on. I'm a transformational CISO at heart. I have been working in the security industry for the last 15, 16 years. Prior to that, another 10 years in IT, general IT. Advisor to multiple startups, multiple successful exits, funding rounds, and so on. Mentor and instructor for SANS for a number of years. And that's probably it. That's a good summary.
Awesome. Wonderful. Nice to meet someone who's actually, a full-time CISO, but has a role with startups. I think it's a phenomenal combination. And looking at the combination with SANS as well makes it a heck of a lot meaningful. I'll tell you quickly what we do. Resilience is focused on AI. Pinnacle is 100% focused on cybersecurity. And Curious, another brand which is actually focused exclusively on EdTech, which is, cybersecurity plays a very, very big part. So all these areas sort of intersect with what you're doing. And I think we call it Curious mainly because it's a brand that focuses on, enabling and fostering curiosity. With respect to, the work that you do, perhaps maybe I can start with maybe some of the biggest problems that you see, today, in the plethora of the landscape of cybersecurity. At least from your angle, what would be the top three problems from startups or companies that you're currently working at, whatever the combination is?
The problems I'll name are probably interconnected. Not probably. They are interconnected, heavily interconnected. First problem, CISOs themselves, the security industry, is both very immature, as in young, and is not as intentional as it should be about what it's doing. It's following what the business and what the market is trying to dictate. And the problem with that is that the market and the business don't understand what they're trying to do either. So the first problem is the security industry, and many of the participants are not digging intentionally deep enough into the why of our jobs. The problem feeding into it is that the startups, the founders, are bringing in amazing tech, amazing technology, amazing ideas, and are falling in the same pit of trying to follow what the business is trying to ask for. And it is very specific in its asks, and it's very non-intentional in its ask. It's very weird. It's very specific because the business feels like it's asking for exactly what it needs. Stop these viruses, stop these phishing attacks, and so on. But those are just symptoms of the underlying problem. Add to that the third problem of the upper management, the boards and executive teams, not fully understanding what cybersecurity is about, not really understanding how to apply it. It's kind of like getting a guard dog and just throwing it in the yard. Hey, you guard. Without, again, trying to intentionally figure out what is it that we're trying to stop and what resources should be allocated to a problem of this magnitude. So the problem isn't well defined, the magnitude is not well defined, the tools and solutions are not well defined, and in that maelstrom, we are being asked to stop things from happening. So I think those are the three problems that are very related to each other, maybe different sides of the same pyramid, but that's what I'm seeing as the biggest problem right now.
No, thank you for articulating that. I think I tend to concur with you, and from what we see, I think companies play to participate, not to win. And when I differentiate that is with respect to cybersecurity, when you play just to participate, you exactly see the symptoms that you basically are referring to. It's not a play to win strategy. A win strategy in this particular case could be, exactly defining, the problem statements you're going after, and ensuring that there is a perfect alignment between the biggest pain point to the solution that needs to be mapped. And I'll say to you that most companies, like you mentioned, do not have their pain point very, very clearly articulated and defined. So let me just give you a different spin for this. If you look at Rolex as a company, people think it sells watches. I believe it sells status and aspiration. If you look at Airbnb, it sells places to stay, but really it's about escaping reality. And if I take companies like us in the cybersecurity space, Pinnacle, we, yes, at one level, at a tactical level, we sell cybersecurity, but what we really sell is in an insurance policy to companies so that their name does not appear on the headline of a newspaper. That's sort of, I think understanding that why is sort of very critical, because it's that why that actually allows you to tailor the how and the what, because not having a clear purpose is actually, a fundamental challenge that I see. Your thoughts?
I agree completely. Although I would challenge you that what you're selling isn't insurance against getting on the front pages. Although, let me rephrase that. That might be what you're selling specifically, but that is not the primary issue that the companies are facing. Ending up on the front pages of newspapers or whatever may be the case is, first of all, not the final problem for these companies, and second, evidence shows it's actually not that big of a problem anyway. Most of the companies, vast majority of the companies that went through a cyber breach, public cyber breach, suffered financially only in a very short term. All of them, most of them, fully recovered. In fact, experienced a jump in stock prices and so on. There's evidence and research to support this. So even ending up on the front pages of the newspaper is now becoming one of those goals that isn't actually going to get you a win. Yeah, it's a PR component that's not the biggest of the whole picture, and it really is a short-term lived one. So even in that, albeit a real problem, it's still a very small part of the big problem, the overall problem. And even in that, we are almost falling for our own rhetoric. You're going to end up on the front pages newspaper. Okay, and because if you end up on the front pages newspaper as another company suffered the breach but responded very well, absolute acceptance of the fault, immediate changes to the security posture, immediate changes to the policies, real changes in the diversity of the company that could improve this, and so on and so on, all of a sudden you're a hero. All of a sudden everyone wants to suffer a cyber breach, because if you follow the playbook on the way out, you might actually benefit from it. So do you really need to stop the cyber breach from happening, or do you just need to set up what's necessary for after the breach to come out on the right side of it? In fact, why don't we hold on investing until we suffer a breach? Because then we have a good backup. And now SEC is helping us out. We can throw all of our failures in the same bucket. And look, we're not meeting our numbers. Why? Well, we suffered a cyber breach. Yeah, I get it. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, you get a pass this year. So all problems can cover. So we're entering this catch-22 loop, and it's almost like the things we're trying to solve for are actually feeding the problem more. And the reason for that is, again, because we're not intentional. We're not We're not aiming for a win. Problem well defined is a problem half solved, and we're not defining the problem well enough.
No, it's well put. I completely concur with that. I was going with the intention that there are companies, which may not be in a position to actually be resilient and actually come out of a cyber breach because, it's just too costly to fix, and you end up in a huge. I was in a situation where one of my clients that we took over after the breach had a massive cyber breach, and it was, I believe, it was like a $12 million ransomware. That was a fairly large number. Their insurance policy only covered for $1 million, so it was a real mess to get out of. And it's those companies that I think sometimes, and I've seen even PE-owned companies that have gone bankrupt because they just don't have the resources or the money to just work on that cyber breach. More so for those companies, and I think I think it's a balance. For those kinds of companies, recovery is out of the question, and then the ones that you talk about, I completely agree. I mean, it's they have a way to actually turn the situation around, look at the problem, and make it an opportunity, and they come out as a hero in those cases. So, I mean, with respect to, boards, what do you think their role really ought to be? Because that's an area which is highly contentious. It is most boards don't really have good cybersecurity representation. Cybersecurity, is a topic, but it's probably just one of the board items that happens to be there. Your thoughts?
Education is what is the solution to the problem, but it isn't the start of it. Again, we're coming back to intentionality. Are you intentional in what you're trying to solve? And when the boards approach this problem and they're intentional about solving their cybersecurity knowledge gap, they could get lucky and get a partner or a vendor that is going to provide them that education, that actually understands enterprise risk management versus cybersecurity management. And if they are unlucky and they end up with someone that's going to teach them about cybersecurity, the board is not going to be ready to use that. The biggest misconception about cybersecurity is that it's about security. And it's not about security, and it's not about protection. To your point about it being an insurance of sorts, the goal of cybersecurity teams, of information security teams, is similar to most other teams in the company supporting business, is in identifying and mitigating risks in its area. If you're a finance team, you're going to be working at mitigating risks with where you put the money, how you handle transfers, and so on and so on. Right? There are specific concerns, specific threats that your team is going to be handling. Marketing, sales, they all have threats that are facing the company in their areas, and their job is to mitigate those threats. Information security is a component of business operations that is supposed to mitigate technological threats. Now, the problem is majority of the companies today are fully 100% technological companies, even if they are not necessarily in the technology business, but they have to have technology to be able to operate. And so instead of concentrating on are we good from cybersecurity perspective, the concentration needs to be, do we understand how to manage risk at an enterprise level? Can we quantify our risk at an enterprise level, regardless of information security, just in general for the company? And if we can't quantify, that's your biggest problem. If you can quantify, then it becomes an exercise of deploying appropriate resources to the appropriate threats at relative probability of those events occurring. And insurance becomes a stopgap for things you cannot mitigate, right? If you can't mitigate something, or it becomes more expensive to mitigate than to transfer to insurance, and that could be your guidance. You just mentioned a company that had a $12 million ransom and only had $1 million insurance. $12 million sounds like a high ransom. So I'm guessing either large amount of data or very, very expensive data. And the company, 12 million, again, is probably based in some way on revenue or what the company's doing. So in that context, I'm feeling that $1 million was very inadequate, and sounds by the situation, that's exactly what occurred. And it should be guided by the risk management decisions, risk quantification decisions. And so instead of concentrating, or rather, not instead of, but when the board says, what should we be learning about cybersecurity, the answer is, you should be learning about enterprise risk quantification. And then cybersecurity becomes just one of the things you could use to buy down the amount of risk you are carrying, inherent and residual. What is your risk appetite? Can a board answer that for? Can executive team answer that for its company? What is the risk appetite? How much money can you lose and not go down? And are you prepared for that? Do you have necessary reserves for that? Do you have necessary insurance for that? And if not, should you be investing in improvement of the situation? Now, there may be some companies, like again, you mentioned, that won't survive, meaning they're already past the point where, a light breeze will tip them over, and they're just surviving up to that point. Now, again, market forces could be the answer to that. Well, inevitable is coming. You will be breached. And when that happens, you won't survive. But now we're talking about sacrificing safety and security of its customers, both from operational perspective, you're losing your vendor, and data loss perspective, privacy loss perspective. And SEC ruling is just a early small step in the direction of that protection, but we need to do a lot more from government level as well.
Any insight on how you have perhaps thought through this concept of quantification of risk, and perhaps maybe a mental model that has worked for you?
How to how to quantify cyber risk, or how to quantify enterprise risk? There are mechanisms already. There are vendors and services available today to give you a better idea. And just like with most things, we don't have to be exact and perfect from the beginning. In fact, trying to be exact and perfect is a recipe for disaster. What you're aiming for is a better decision. To quote How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity by Doug Hubbard and Richard Sisson, when we lower the amount of uncertainty, we can make better decisions. And I'm paraphrasing. So one step is to learn more about yourself in every respect. The more you know, the better decisions you can make, the more information you have available to make those decisions. Quantifying, even at a very high level, the revenue streams, correlation of those revenue streams to teams, to systems, to offices, to projects, and so on and so on. Assets that you already have, things that you have and trying to protect, and things you're trying to maintain operational, so revenue protection. Those are numbers you already know. And even if you're in millions of dollars versus hundreds of thousands in terms of accuracy, you're a lot closer than you were before. At $12 million ransom cost, I'm not even talking about, so 12 million, it sounds to me like at least 35 to 40 million combined total damage between remediation costs, the fines, and so on that will probably follow. So that's probably the overall cost. And $1 million insurance policy tells me that they were 30 to 40 times off. That's a massive discrepancy. Now, if you simply were not 40 times, but 4 times off, so instead of having a $1 million, you would have $10 million policy, you would already be in a much better place. So you would literally be saving yourself $9 million. And that could be a matter of 3 hours worth of exercises to get to that number. Is it worth, $3 million per hour spent? And that's what we're not doing because we're not intentional about answering those questions. So there are many ways to get very specific, and the more mature you are, the better you will be. But you can't be immediately very mature. It has to start somewhere. But even starting at the very bottom level will immediately put you in a situation where you are aware and at least can start planning for the future slowly. At a minimum, putting yourself in a position where you are no longer grossly negligent. Maybe you're still negligent or were negligent, but you are improving now. And so if you ever come in front of a judge, instead of saying, we have no idea, and the judge saying you should have, this is your fiduciary responsibility as the board and the executive team, you would be able to say, look, we didn't know well enough, we weren't educated well enough, but guess what? We tried. We learned, we dug into it, and we started to improve. We couldn't get to it in time, financial situation, market forces, etc., but we tried. And that's a much better place to be, both in terms of prison time and or fines that will be levied. So starting this process is the most important thing. How you get there, again, plenty of people and plenty of vendors and solutions that can get you started. And as you go through this process, you will gain maturity necessary to improve the approach. You can't get the formula from day one. It has to be in an iterative effort.
Now, thank you for that. Couple of quick, observations. One is the way we look at it is that to your point, we all know what optimism is. We look at tomorrow being better than today. Pessimism, we look at tomorrow being worse than today. And we sort of classify this as definite optimism and indefinite optimism, and definite pessimism and indefinite pessimism. Because if
you're missing realism. It's going to be, tomorrow is going to be worse than today, but we are preparing for that.
That is definite optimism. That's realistic. Because I think in cybersecurity, right? I mean, you're better off probably even being a definite pessimist, because tomorrow is going to be worst off potentially, but at least I have a plan. To your point, that I'm working through, so that I know that even in that scenario I'm okay. But I think what we see commonly, which you probably do as well, is indefinite optimism, which means that I know tomorrow is going to be better, but I'm hoping for a lottery, and that's sort of the mechanism that I see, in most enterprises. And
I like how you called lack of foresight indefinite optimism. That's a good way to describe that.
Yeah, and so what we generally do is we classify these things into some of the things that you said. The framework we follow is it starts with known knowns all the way to unknown unknowns. So we look at it in a 2x2 matrix, and we say, okay, what are known knowns? What are known unknowns? What are unknown knowns? And what are unknown unknowns? So if you bucket them, then at least you have a sort of a picture of to the aspects that I known knowns. I should be able to control this. Unknown unknowns is a bit of an extreme, so I got to really work a little harder. The other two, have a moderate level of complexity. Unknown knowns, of course, means you potentially have an APT or an AAT in your environment, and you just don't have a way of finding it. So we sort of classify it so that you can sort of corral it in some way, so that you can pull this together. One of my clients has about 1.5 million vulnerabilities that we are having to classify. And this is one quadrant that we actually use to say, okay, how do we actually now go about it? Because vulnerability management is a big issue, as you
know. The 4x4, 2x2 box you described, there's another way to look at it. There's a framework called Sinofin framework, describes complexity, starting from chaotic, which in your description is unknown unknowns. We don't know what we don't know. Next step up is complex. We know that we don't know. No, sorry. We know that we don't know. I'm getting confused here. Complexity.
See, it's I know what I know. I know what I don't know, and I don't know what I don't know.
Right, and I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I know, and exactly. So first, I don't know what I don't know. Chaos. I don't know what I know. Complexity. I know what I don't know. Complicated, and I know what I know. Simple. And only in the simple, you can start enabling automation. So if you're in a situation where you have any presence in unknown unknowns, and most companies do, you're in a chaotic environment. Now, 1.2 million vulnerability sounds like a big problem. But what's the total number? And you won't be able to tell me what the total number is. And that is a bigger problem than having 1.2 million vulnerabilities.
Exactly.
And that's what, but instead of trying to figure out the full number, companies are spending millions on fixing 1.2 million vulnerabilities, omitting one or two that are actually going to get it breached.
Exactly. And that's absolutely correct. No, thank you. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you're open to it, I'd like to have a follow-on with you. I do have a hard stop with a client meeting now, but if you're good with it, let's pick up the thread and do one more because I do have quite a few, and I just want to allow a little extra time because this is insightful and I'm enjoying it. If you feel the same way, we'd love to catch up again for a follow-on cyberphysics.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to it. Thank you so much.
As we wrap up this enlightening episode of the Cyberphysics podcast, we want to express our deep appreciation to our insightful guests, Ranghan, Venkatraman, and Dmitriy Sokolovskiy, for sharing their wisdom with us today. Cyberphysics, in essence, has indeed brought us closer to understanding the intricate forces that govern our digital world. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of cybersecurity. Stay connected, stay informed, and remember, the essence of cyberphysics is ever present in our connected reality. Until next time, keep exploring and seeking the equilibrium between innovation and safeguarding. Thank you for joining us on this captivating journey.